today, but that's why I put the homework on Math Excel, because it's all like multiple choice. So you don't have to write a bunch of sentences out, but we're going to write some stuff out on the notes today. So just a couple words you're going to see. Population, it's all members of a set. So population, we're going to collect some statistics about a population. So the population would include all members of a set, and your sample is going to be part of the population. Okay, so just as a little example, like let's say Homestead High School was the population, and then this class could be a sample of the population. So it's not everybody, but it's part of the group, if that makes sense. So what we're going to use this for is we're going to break these into some sampling methods and talk about how you can get a decent sample and maybe what might be a good sample versus not. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Okay. Now, you can get good information that you can use statistically about a population, so a whole group, by studying a sample of that population. So we can make conclusions about the whole group based on part of the group, is basically where this is going. So I have a tiny little just example to give you just in general before we start getting into these different methods. But this just says, suppose you want to know what percentage of all voters in your city favor a tax increase to pay for school improvements. Okay? It's likely, if we were to actually do this, we wouldn't go to everybody's door, knock on their door, and ask them what their opinion was. That would probably not be a feasible thing to do. So this says, instead of asking every voter, every single person their opinion, we would make a sample of the voters and then use that sample to maybe inform how the people in general in the population would feel about it. So I've got a couple different ways we could make samples, and I'm going to give you guys the definition, and then I have an example of each to the side. Okay, so the first type is called a convenience. And for a convenience sample, you're going to select the members based on convenience. Okay, so convenience is, I don't know, like a really, really good substitute word for that, but something that's convenient to me would be maybe something that's really easy for me to do, something I don't have to really work at. So something that's convenient, you don't have to do much about it. So the example here says you want to sample a group of high schoolers to represent Homestead, and you ask the 25 people in your fourth period class. That's convenient for you because you're in the class, you can just ask everybody in there. But is that a good sample or not? We're going to talk about that in a minute. Convenience is basically just like there's not much effort going into the person asking the question. It's just what's easy for them. All right, so in general, convenient samples, it says good or bad. In general, I feel like they kind of fall in the bad category because if it's convenient, it's not necessarily representing the whole population. We're going to talk about that on the back here a little bit, but each one of these kind of say good or bad. I would say this would lean more toward the bad choice because it's not usually a great representation of the whole population. Okay, self-selected sample. Okay, so my little example here says, teacher wonders if all their students like their teaching style. So the teacher sends out a link to all students asking them to respond just yes or no, do they like the teaching style? Okay, now if a teacher would do, like if I'd send you a link, you don't have to respond to it. So it's only going to be responded to by the people that want to respond to it. So this is called self-selected. So this is basically like you select members based on volunteers. I'm sure you guys get like surveys and other stuff sometimes. You don't have to respond to it. So self-selected is basically the person's choice to respond or the person's choice to kind of volunteer to be part of the survey or study or whatever you're working with. Now, again, in general, self-selected would, I mean, it can be, but I would say this would generally lean toward the bad category because people that are self-selected, they're taking the initiative to respond. Okay, so so maybe they're passionate about the topic that you're asking, or maybe they're just, they really want to respond for whatever reason. So self-selected, when people volunteer for stuff, they might not necessarily be representative of the whole population. Okay, the next one is called systemic. All right, so this says you want to know what percentage of Homestead students like Pepsi or Coke. So this says you get a complete list of all the students from the guidance department. They're alphabetized, and then you select every 15th student on that list to ask them which type of pop they prefer. Okay, so systemic. You're going to order the population in some way. In this example, they're alphabetized. So we're going to order the population. And then it says they pick every 15th student. In this particular example, you are going to select your sample members at regular intervals is how you would write this. So the regular intervals would they'd be looking at the list and they select every 15th person. Or maybe they say, oh, we select every 3rd person or every 5th person or something like that. But you're selecting them in some way at a regular interval. What do you guys think for this one? Would this blend more toward being a good sample or a bad sample? This one's better than the other two for sure. I would say in general, this one tends to be a pretty good representation of the population because it's a little bit more representative. Okay, and then the last one, this is called a random sample, and this is kind of long, but it says, I want to know what percentage of voters in the district favor a tax to pay for school construction project. I assign every voter a unique number. Now this says 1 to n. N would just be like the number of voters. So like, let's say we're in the district and there were 30,000 voters, then my numbers would be 1 to n. Okay, you use a random number generator like we had on the calculator to generate 30 unique numbers out of that list, 1 through 30,000 or whatever it was. And then you survey or you go and talk to the people whose number corresponds to their name. Okay, so this is, again, you're going to order the population in some way. Maybe that's alphabetical. Maybe it's, especially if you're doing a big, it might be by street address or something like that. And then you select members totally at random. And I'm just going to add a little note. Like in these scenarios, everyone is equally likely to be chosen. Another way you might be presented with a random, if it doesn't say use a random number generator, they might say something like, okay, we're in my example with 30,000 people, this wouldn't be smart, but you know, like let's say we just did it with the high school. We put everybody's name on a little piece of paper and we just grabbed it out of a hat or a bucket or wherever we put them. That would be another example of a random sample. You are randomly selecting people. It's not at regular intervals like the systemic one. What do you guys think about this one? Is this good or bad? This one is pretty good because everyone is equally likely to be chosen. You're randomly selecting people, and so that's going to actually remove some of what we're going to talk about next, which is bias. Okay, and then I'm just going to give you guys this couple situations, and you're going to see if you can tell me which one of those methods that we just talked about it falls into, and maybe kind of defend your opinion a little bit here. Okay, now, samples, we had 4 different types on the front that we just talked about, so they vary in how well they actually reflect the population. We kind of talked about that as we went through. Okay, now, a sample has what we call a bias when part of the population is either overrepresented or underrepresented. some kind of bias, like one group is maybe got better representation than the other in your total population. All right, and then the technical definition here, a bias is a systemic error that is somehow introduced by the sampling method. And as we go through these situations, you guys can kind of think about, like, how would this introduce bias into maybe, am I over-representing a group or under-representing a group in who I'm asking for this sample? Okay, so each one of these in example one kind of goes with the same scenario, but it's a different way to ask the question. So here's the scenario. Just as newspaper wants to find out what % of the city's population, and they want to increase a tax to raise money for local parks. So this is about raising money to improve the parks in the community. What sampling method is used for each situation? So the ones we talked about on the front. And then does the sample have a bias? And then we want to just, this is, a lot of it is your opinion or how you could defend this. Okay, so this says newspaper article on the tax increase invites readers to express their opinion on the newspaper's website. Okay, so what method, and from our options on the front, we had convenience, we had self-selecting, we had a systemic, and we had random. So if I write an article in the newspaper about this tax increase, and I ask people to respond to it on the newspaper's website, which one of those methods? It should be self-selecting, because no, it's okay, it should be self-selecting. All right, because the people are choosing to respond to the newspaper article. They're logging onto their computer, they're typing this up on their Word document or their PDF, whatever, they're uploading it, and they're responding to this on the newspaper's website. Would you say here that this has a bias to it? Okay, why? Yeah, okay, yeah, perfect. Okay, so anybody that responds to this has to be somebody that gets the newspaper, right? So you have to get the newspaper to even see this article to be able to respond to this. Can you see anything else that would be maybe biased about this? Like I'd have to get a newspaper to even respond to this, because otherwise I wouldn't know about it. What else might be something that would be biased about this? Yeah, the newspaper, maybe we didn't see the article, maybe the article would kind of try and influence people one way or the other. What else maybe would have a bias here? I don't even know if you guys are going to think about this. So it says they have to respond with their opinions on the newspaper's website. You'd have to pay for it, but what else would I have to have if I was going to respond to this? You'd have to have a computer. That's also a bias. Like, you'd have to have a computer. And I know this day and age most people do, but not everybody does. Okay. My grandma couldn't operate a computer for life. She can do pretty well with an iPad, but she could not write an article on a newspaper website if she needed to. Like, so it's biased in that manner too, I would say, because you'd have to be a newspaper subscriber and you'd also have to have a computer. Okay, now, same scenario. We want to ask people about this tax to improve the city's parks. This one says there's a reporter, and they're just going to interview people as they exit the park. What kind of method was that from the front? They're just a reporter. They're going to stand at the entrance or exit to the park, and they're just going to interview people as they leave. This one's the convenience one, because they're not making much effort. They went to the park, but they're just grabbing people as they leave. Forgive me, I always spell this wrong. Okay. I still think I spelled that wrong. I still did. All right, sorry guys, I am horrible at this word, and I don't know why. Okay, convenience, I think that's close to it. Just put a C if you want to. Okay, now, what do we think? Is this one got a bias? Okay, why, what, I would say yeah. Why is this one biased? Exactly. Okay, these are people at the park. So these are people that are using the park. So they're probably more likely to be in favor of a tax to improve the park if they're using the park. So these people are using the park. That's a clear bias. You're not randomly interviewing somebody that's not using the park. So these people would probably be more in favor of this tax to improve the park. Okay, what if we had a survey service call every 50th person? I know they don't make phone books anymore, but let's say they had a list of people's cell phone numbers, and I called every 50th person. Which one of the methods would this be? This one, because it's every 50th person. It's really similar to random, but this one is actually called the systemic, because it's every 50th person, or if it's every 10th person, it's at certain intervals. This would be systemic. Would you guys say this one's biased? I would say this would lean toward no. Maybe if you wanted to argue with me, you could say the person would have to have a phone. I'm pretty sure, in a real population of people, most people are going to have a phone. This time period, most people would have a phone. So to exclude the people that don't have a phone there, I would say maybe that's not going to be a reason to not use this as a good sample method. Okay, now my last one is not related to the newspaper situation. This is just totally separate scenario. So this one says, high school with 150 seniors wants to find the percent of seniors who plan to attend college. A list of every senior is obtained and each student is assigned a number from 1 to 150, so everybody's got their own number. 40 random unique numbers are generated. We could use like the calculator generator to do that. And it says the students whose numbers correspond to the numbers generated are then asked what their plans are, if they're going to go to college or not, and they record the results. Which one of the methods would this one be? This one's random. A lot of the times you will see the word random in the actual description. So this one is definitely random sampling. And would you say that this one is biased? I would say no for this one. I honestly could not think of an argument for why this would be biased, because they're talking about this specific high school's population. If we were talking about high school populations across the entire country, maybe I could argue that this was biased because I'm only using one school, but this is just specifically to this school, so nothing for me to explain there if I don't think there's a bias. Is anybody having a question?